Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
But let's put some of those thoughts to Dominic. Grieve, first of all, remains supporting Conservative, who backed Rory Stewart for the leadership and has yet to publicly declare who he's supporting. But if we can just pick up with where Elizabeth ended, Dominic, Boris Johnson has said Parliament would be willing to back no deal if they had to. That's where he thinks Parliament is now.
I think he's seriously mistaken about that. No deal is catastrophic for this country, not just about the economic relationship, but about the national security implications of losing access to the shared databases which protect us, and, on top of that, for the Union of the United Kingdom. It's an absolute deal breaker as far as I'm concerned, and I think you will find that there are numerous other Conservative members of Parliament who share that view. Of course, if he wishes to renegotiate, it's a matter for him. Whether he can succeed if he becomes Prime Minister is another matter.
You said a deal breaker.
Well, it's a deal breaker in the sense it's the moment when the national interest goes clearly in front of any party political considerations I could possibly have. Yes, totally. A no-deal Brexit is a catastrophe, and I will not go down in history as an MP who's facilitated it.
How many, realistically, do you think are like you in your party?
I think there are a substantial number. It's
10,
very difficult.
15?
I think 10, 15, I think without difficulty, and there might be more. It really is. It is an unrealistic proposition. And I worry because throughout this whole of this campaign, there has been a tendency to pretend that this isn't a major issue, that it can be somehow brushed under the carpet. It can't be. It is so damaging to our country and its future that anybody who puts the national interest at the forefront of what they do as a Member of Parliament cannot ignore that.
You're telling me that Conservative MPs will bring down a Conservative government?
If a Prime Minister decides to do something which appears to be completely crazy, which is trying to drag us out with no deal without the approval of the House of Commons, because obviously if the House of Commons chose to approve a no-deal Brexit, it would be another matter, but simply said, well, I've decided that no deal is the thing we're going to do and you're going to have to go along with it, I think you will find, obviously, the first thing people would do is to try to find some way of deflecting this and also preserving the unity of the party. But if it came to the crunch, then I'm afraid, at that point, the country has to come before party.
Are you sure? Because when Rory Stewart couldn't even bring himself to vote with the Labour amendment against no deal, people thought, well, that's what will happen. They'll bottle it. Nobody in your party wants to let in Jeremy Corbyn.
It's absolutely right. I don't want to let in Jeremy Corbyn. I think it would be a disaster for this country. But it would also be a disaster for this country and likely to lead to a Corbyn government if we carry out a crazy Brexit. And a no-deal Brexit is exactly that.
OK, well, let's move away from no deal, because Boris Johnson, in that interview, said he hopes the EU would be willing to grant a period of time where the status quo is maintained. In other words, for a deal to be finalised after Brexit, during that implementation period. He would look at the knotty issues like the Irish border in that implementation period after we'd actually left.
Well, I think it's very unlikely that the EU will agree to this. This is a rather different issue. Clearly, he's entitled to go away and negotiate whatever he likes. And I wish him well. And if he can come along with some separate or different deal from the one which the Prime Minister brought back, he should be allowed to do that. And we can then consider what he's produced. But I have to say that I have serious doubts that this is a realistic proposal, because there's never been an indication from the EU that they would be prepared to do this. And it would be a remarkable sea change if they were.
Dominic Grieve, thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Joining us now, Bernard Jenkin, supporter of Boris Johnson. There cannot be an implementation period without the withdrawal. You accept that?
Well, if there's a basic interim trade deal struck before the 31st of October, just on goods, which can be done on a few sheets of paper under the GATT Article 24 arrangements, with the agreement of the EU, and incidentally, nobody's ever suggested that this would be done without the agreement of the EU.
But
and I noticed the BBC website says Boris Johnson has admitted that it has to be done by agreement. Okay. He's never suggested it wouldn't be done.
You've jumped ahead, so just take us, hold my hand, as it were, step by step. The withdrawal agreement is now defunct. Is that right? It goes out the window.
Well, it's pretty well dead. It's been voted down effectively 5 times, hasn't it? It was held back once, voted down 3 times, and then the Prime Minister tried to bring it forward
So he's not
again.
going to salvage anything from that?
Well,
he's not going to bring...
what he said was there are parts of the withdrawal agreement, like the bits on citizenship, which we can implement unilaterally as a goodwill gesture towards the European Union. We can guarantee the rights of EU citizens in the UK, for example.
OK, so, but broadly, as he said, it's defunct, it's dead, whatever. The money, the 39 billion, he was very vague on that tonight. He talked about creative ambiguity again. Does the money, 39 billion, go to Europe or not if the withdrawal agreement is dead?
Well, I think, speaking personally, I would like to make some of those payments in order to make sure that we get the goodwill. But if the EU is going to sort of put up the barriers, be anti-free trade, not talk about anything...
We haven't even got there yet.
Well, then we probably have the right to withhold the money. But the point is we have the right to withhold the money. Even the House of Lords committee said that we have the right to
we're moving
withhold
step by step, aren't we?
Okay.
And you've said that the withdrawal agreement is defunct and the EU should somehow come to the table anyway, even though they've said that they're not going to start negotiations at all if the withdrawal agreement isn't signed.
Well, if it is clear that the withdrawal agreement is dead, and it is, the EU has to ask itself what is in its interests, in the interests of its people, and it's actually written down in the EU treaties to be in favour of free trade. They're not going to be putting up barriers to free trade.
This is what we got from the Irish Senate's Brexit committee literally half an hour ago. The withdrawal agreement is closed and will not be reopened, OK?
Yeah, well, that's why it's not worth trying to renegotiate the withdrawal agreement.
OK, so you think that even though you haven't yet committed to the 39 billion and you've said the withdrawal agreement is dead, that they're going to somehow come to the table and start talking to you about a future trade?
If we're going to leave the European Union on the 31st of October, do they really want to put tariffs on trade between the UK and the EU? Because it will be rather less to their advantage than to us. We will collect quite a large quantity of money, 13 billion a year or so, on what they sell to us.
Well,
if they will collect a tiny fraction of that, I don't think the German...
They want you to sign the deal or to stay in, but as things happen in law, we will go onto WTO rules. That's what happens.
Unless there's an Article 24 agreement between the EU and the UK, in which case we can have an interim free trade agreement leading to a fully comprehensive free trade agreement, which is what Donald Tusk originally promised back in March 18.
Liam Fox said that's absolutely not going to happen. He's been working on this for 3 years, and he's a Brexiteer. He said you have to have an agreement to benefit from any temporary relaxation.
Correct.
He knows what he's talking about.
That's exactly what I said.
Right.
There has to be an agreement under Article 24.
So why would they? Just explain this to me.
Well,
why would they
because they might be
agree?
interested in jobs and employment in Germany and France. They sell us far more stuff than we sell to them, and it will damage them if there are
OK, so they've been absolutely clear. They've been absolutely clear that they're not renegotiating. You haven't even put the 39 billion definitely on the table at this point.
Well, obviously, if what's bad about the withdrawal agreement as it stands is we put 39 billion on the table before we've even started talking about a future trade agreement. And that's a very bad deal.
OK.
So you know,
do you know that the EU is happy to meet you on this GATT arrangement?
Well, it's up to them, isn't it?
Well, no. Do you know, because you're speaking for Boris Johnson tonight, do you know that they are willing and open to agree some kind of interim...
No, of course not.
You don't?
But it's up to them, isn't it? Do they want to bring the shutters down on free trade between the UK and the EU, which would be destructive of their economies, as well, particularly for Ireland, particularly for Germany, particularly for northern France, or actually will they want to talk to us on a reasonable basis, in line with the aspirations of their own treaty, which says in Article 8 they want to have good neighbourly relations and free trade with their neighbouring states? I'm trying to get my head around this,
because you've had 3 years, and Boris Johnson...
Well, I haven't had 3 years, actually. I've not been running the government, nor is Boris. Boris resigned from this government.
You, the Brexiteers...
We haven't had a government for 3 years.
...have had the chance as a Conservative government. You're still a Conservative, aren't you? Right, OK. So Boris Johnson, from the sounds of it, hasn't had those conversations yet with the EU. He doesn't have a deal. He doesn't have the policy. He doesn't have...
Well, I mean, you're saying all these things as assertions.
Well, you tell me. No, I'm just interested, because if you've had those conversations with the EU and you know that there is something on which you can pin this hope, then that's fantastic for the whole country. But at the moment, that's all it is. Well, it's a hope.
Well, the EU has been playing very hardball with the British government so far. and on the basis that the British government would crumble, and Theresa May did crumble.
Well, we didn't
that's why
leave in
that's why we're in a bit of a political crisis
in April,
now.
And so they haven't crumbled at all, have they? They haven't crumbled.
No, but that's why we need a new Prime Minister.
Okay, so we'll have a new Prime Minister.
Yes.
But what makes you think that he will then bring the EU to the table to do the thing that it's consistently said for 3 years it won't do? You are pinning all this on a hope.
Well, I'm not. It's not guaranteed. And if the EU really wants to apply tariffs to trade with, it wants us to apply tariffs on what they sell to us, well, they can choose that course. It's not our choice. We're going to offer them the opportunity for an interim free trade agreement under Article 24 of the GATT Treaty. If they don't want that, that really is up to them. We can then cut some of our tariffs unilaterally across the whole. We can reduce some of the costs of imports coming into this country across the board.
You'd accept that we have to go onto WTO rules, which are the same tariff right across the board.
Yes, but we can set our own tariff schedule.
We have to cut tariffs for everyone.
Yes, that's right. And the government has published a draft tariff schedule
so basically,
to show what tariffs we would cut.
That if the EU doesnn't agree to your interim GATT, we are on WTO tariffs at the same tariff for everyone, every deal we do. You accept that?
Well, except for all the countries we've already done, we've novated the free trade agreements the EU has with other countries, like South Korea, like Switzerland, quite substantial trading partners of ours. But we will have free trade agreements with those people, and we will quickly have a free trade agreement with the United States, because the United States...
Again, you don't know that either, because
the President has said it. I mean, you asked me, the EU has not said it, but the President of the United States has said it in terms. Perhaps you don't believe him either.
I just want to understand the policy that you are helping businesses to understand, because you're the Conservative Party, you're the party of business.
In the worst case, if the EU insists on abandoning free trade and applying tariffs, there will be some of our industries, like agriculture and motors, that will be quite hard hit by the highest tariffs. We will have £39 billion and the income we're collecting on the goods.
So we're not going to give them any of that 39. No, I just want to understand that money. 39 billion doesn't go to the EU at all.
Well, if they're not giving us any kind of trade deal whatsoever, why should we give them £39 billion?
OK. So wouldn't it be
But the point is, we will use that money to support the sectors that are hardest hit by the highest tariffs.
I just wonder why you
So
wouldn't
the
say
sheep farmers in Shropshire, for example.
We haven't had those conversations with the EU. We don't know that they'll come to the table. They've repeatedly said they won't reopen the withdrawal agreement. They haven't talked about GATT or Article 24. So at this point, the best thing we can do is accept it's going to be WTO terms, warn our farmers, warn our car industry, create the car parks we need or whatever we do, and just say we will prepare. We'll have that extra money. We will prepare for that no deal, and businesses can get used to it.
And that's what the European Union is doing well. There are 11 extra lanes at Calais for queuing trucks if necessary. They've set up a SPS area. And when you say we've got to warn our farmers, what we need is a government who's going to put in place the programmes to support our farmers, to support the motor industry, to make sure that because we will be quids in. We will be cashing in, not crashing out.
So it should be a great thing, then?
Oh, well, the economy will probably grow faster in the first year after we leave the EU, even without a withdrawal agreement.
Is this you or is this Boris Johnson? Because he's just said it's very unlikely we'll leave with no deal. And you sound positively excited about no deal now.
Except that what Boris is determined to do is absolutely flat-out prepare for leaving without a withdrawal agreement, because actually that makes it much less likely. If the EU see that we are ready to leave without a withdrawal agreement, and without any agreement at all, if that's what they really, really want, then I think you will begin to see some fragmentation, because it's not what they want. And in fact, in the run-up to the 29th of March, German industry, the head of the German CBI equivalent, was saying, we must have a deal, we must have a deal.
Let's see where we are.
They'll come to the table.
OK, thank you very much indeed. Thanks for coming in.